What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review Superman, written and directed by James Gunn, and this review will be largely spoiler-free, but I will have some spoilers toward the end of the video, but I'll warn you verbally, and I'll have a time code down below. But this is one of those movies that's already being so hotly debated. A lot of people are reviewing it without even seeing it. I'm seeing a lot of people that are just determined to like it no matter what, and I'm seeing a lot of people who are determined to hate it no matter what. And I suspect that my video will be frustrating to people in either camp because I found plenty to love about this movie and a few details that I outright despise. But I will try to give fair and honest coverage to all of the above. But I think it's safe to say this will be the most hotly debated blockbuster of the summer, because with a movie like Jurassic World Rebirth, there's nothing to debate. But with Superman, the character's been around since 1938. People have very strong, passionate opinions about the character, and I welcome all of them. Like, I grew up at a time before the internet where people would just have screaming matches in comic shops about the things that they were into, so I am no stranger to adversarial conversations about superheroes. And if you want to hear me do the deep dive on all my favorite iterations about the character in the past, I'll leave a link down in the description below to a recent video that I did. It's an hour and a half long where I tackle everything from 1938 to 2025, animation, radio, TV, movies, video games, you name it. But I suspect there are going to be a lot of diehard Superman fans, or just a lot of diehard comic book fans in general, where they're going to have certain characters and scenes that they love and adore, and they'll disagree about which of those scenes are fantastic. Like for me, Crypto was incredible. Guy Gardner was hilarious. Mr. Terrific was cool as shit. Jimmy Olsen, actually for me, was the best ingredient in the movie, something I did not anticipate saying going into it, but I'll get into my reasons why in a sec. And then there's some other ingredients where I was like, ugh, like, there's an approach to the story which is all about suffering and then giving the audience like a payoff or a reward at the end. But like the first half of the movie at times is so grating and irritating and aggravating that at times you feel like you're being kind of like force-fed like 1,000 angry social media feeds at the same time. You're like, dude, like I get this all day anyway. I go to the movies for an escape. And I think for people who like movies to be an escape from politics and social media confrontations, this movie is going to be pretty headache-inducing for most of the running time. On the other hand, if you show some patience and you give the movie a chance, there will come a point in the movie where like, I get what James Gunn's been working toward. There is a sense of hope and optimism and joy and euphoria that he's building to, but he really puts you through the ringer to get there. And at a certain point, I did start getting goosebumps. And I was like, all right, James Gunn, maybe you overplayed your hand, and there are going to be some people that are so alienated by the initial like first half of the movie, they might not be retrievable by the second half of the movie. But you know what? I can't worry about everybody else. I can only worry about my own reactions. But as I suspected for months, like after I saw the first trailer, I was like, slam dunk, home run, this movie's going to be an absolute billion-dollar success. I love everything I'm seeing. Then when I saw the second trailer, I was like, methinks this movie's going to be alienating to some, including myself. And there were plenty of ingredients that I was alarmed about in that second trailer, where sadly I turned out to be correct. They continue to annoy me in the final film. But I do love and adore James Gunn's movies. From his earliest days as a screenwriter, writing crazy shit like Tromeo and Juliet for Lloyd Kaufman, or movies like Dawn of the Dead, or his early feature films like Slither or Super, or his weird internet content like PG porn, everything you love about porn, but without the sex. I mean, I was a big fan of all the above. And when it comes to his recent superhero crop, I mean, I saw Guardians of the Galaxy 4 times in the theater, 3 times upon its initial release, a 4th time when Volume 3 came out. And The Suicide Squad is my favorite superhero movie of the last 5 years. I saw it 3 times opening weekend. So I am a James Gunn fan, but having said that, I am going to criticize the shit out of this movie for a few essential details. But let's start with the most important ingredient of all, David Cornsweet as Kal-El, a.k.a. Clark Kent, a.k.a. the Man of Steel, Superman himself. I think he was just fine, but he was oftentimes let down by the screenplay given to him by James Gunn. I'm sure David Cornsweet, when he signed up to play this role, did not want to act like a pouty, whiny teenager throughout a big chunk of the running time, but that is what James Gunn called upon him to do. And perhaps I'm biased just because I grew up during the Christopher Reeve era, where he was the definition of calm and self-assured. And even if he lost his temper or got upset, it was for a very, very good reason. And some are going to argue that he's got his reasons here, but when he's arguing or debating with somebody, he shouldn't be like, people were going to die. Like,
I would question myself in the same situation and consider the consequences.
People were going to die.
He gets so emotional, and I was like, dude, you are Not doing it for me at all. However, toward the end of the movie, when he finally gets to, I mean, surprise, surprise, the movie's a Superman movie, and it all ends up turning out just fine. As he starts to assert himself and take control of the situation, I was believing it. Like, not every actor is going to be equally good. We've had a lot of different people voice him and play him and portray him in all forms of media going back 87 years, and Christopher Reeve will always be my favorite, and my second favorite will always be the Fleischer Brothers animated series from 1941. But I think Cornswett's going to be just fine. If they can give him better material moving forward, I think he could be an amazing Superman. He looks the part. He's tall. He's strong. He's as wholesome as apple pie. Perhaps he doesn't completely nail that gentlemanly, polite conduct that Christopher Reeve just made seem so effortless. Christopher Reeve honestly just made everything seem effortless about Superman, and that's why he's incomparable in the role, because everybody else seems to be straining, or the filmmakers seem to be straining, trying to capture something that just came as was as effortless as breathing back in 1978, which is a very tough bar to try and match, or very tough example to try and match. But at least we have that one great shining example from movies that we can always look to and be like, all right, yeah, that is what Superman should always aspire to be.
General, would you care to step outside?
Superman!
But I think where David Cornswett's at his best is when he's interacting with Krypto, and that's kind of hard to do because you have a digital dog. I don't know how often they had a practical dog on the set, but James Gunn's a giant animal fanatic, and I come from a family of dog lovers. We all love and adore dogs, and I have a lot of siblings who have tons of dogs at home, and I'm happy to spend all day, every day, the rest of my life just playing with dogs, and I would consider my life well spent. But they really nail their interactions because Krypto, while he's easy to love, he's not a very good boy. He misbehaves horribly. He's kind of a bad dog in a lot of ways, and we learn toward the end of the movie why he has some behavioral issues, and that payoff was incredibly satisfying and had me absolutely howling. I did laugh quite a few times in this movie, but my two biggest laughs by far were with scenes involving Jimmy Olsen. But I did like David Cornswett, and there are a few scenes of the Daily Planet where we see Clark and Lois and Jimmy all interacting. Sadly, Perry's not as good as I would have liked. And admittedly, Perry, we've also had a very tough example to follow from the 1978 Superman. But Perry White's fine in this movie, but he's not amazing. I was really hoping for the entire Daily Planet staff to be first rate. But I realize I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I haven't even discussed the plot yet, and I want to be spoiler-free, but let's just say Lex Luthor has cooked up a grand plan that will be incredibly beneficial to him, and part of that plan is destroying the reputation of Superman and either locking him away and killing him, but killing both him and his reputation for all time so that Lex Luthor's ambitions can be uninterrupted and proceed as planned. And it's a pretty incredible plan, and the movie really hits the ground running. From the moment the movie starts, you're just like, oh my God, are y'all gonna slow down and take a breath? If you have a short attention span, you will have no trouble hanging in there with this movie, because it's just it's so fast paced. Like I said, it's like being bombarded by a bunch of social media feeds, but also with a ton of violence and insanity. And it's just, I imagine on second viewings, it'll probably be more enjoyable because it won't seem like such a bombardment. And also the overall kind of secret plan or agenda of James Gunn's story construction, you'll know it in advance, so perhaps it won't be as frustrating as the first time through. There were a few times where I was kind of grinding my teeth in frustration, in particular with the scene from the second trailer, which I fucking hated in the second trailer, and I fucking hated in this movie. Early on in the movie, we get a big, long fight between Clark and Lois, and it's just awful. And Rachel Brosnahan, she is very sexy and very cool and very, very self-assured in her role as Lois, but it's a very combative exchange, and that's the exchange where Clark really starts losing his cool. And I was like, maybe at the 2/3 mark of the movie, you could have that, and at the end of the scene, have a reconciliation, and then he goes off and saves the day. But to have it early in the movie, it just felt like James Gunn was trying a little bit too hard to completely, totally eradicate Superman, because a lot of people feel like the character is too powerful. And I get it, he is very powerful. But all you have to do is give him two problems to solve at the same time, and Superman is no longer quite so powerful, because as powerful as he is, he cannot be in two places at the same time. And this movie does take advantage of that, where there'll be multiple crises. He obviously can only handle, the biggest gaping wound, which is why he's got some friends along for the ride to help out. But I always feel like Superman the movie proved all you have to do is send 2 nuclear weapons in different directions, and Superman is totally screwed because he'll have to make a choice, and it's always going to be the lesser of 2 evils. But like with the movie overall, if you're a fan of Lois or if you're a fan of Rachel Brosnahan, if you're patient, you will be rewarded for your patience. But human beings and moviegoers aren't necessarily renowned for their patience. So I think there are going to be a lot of people where if you alienate them to such a degree early on, they're tough to get back, no matter how talented a storyteller James Gunn might be. But I will encourage people to be patient. But if you're like, you know what, fuck this movie, and you walk out, you know what, it's your time, your money. You use your time and money as you see fit. And I will not blame you for feeling some mild agitation at this movie. But let's get into some of the other members of the cast. Nicholas Hoult is a pretty goddamn good Lex Luthor. Obviously quite different from the way Gene Hackman portrayed him in the movie, which is quite different from how Lex Luthor's portrayed in the comics, where he was much more of like a hardcore sci-fi, mad villain, whereas Gene Hackman took the character in a direction that no one else has been able to replicate ever since. But Nicholas Hoult, if you just want to see the diabolical, kind of bitter, envious guy, where if not for his just seething resentment of Superman, he probably could not only solve all the world's problems, but colonize the known solar system. But he's so hell-bent upon putting Superman in his place, he's always tripping over himself, trying to destroy him when his time could be much better spent. But Nicholas Hoult, there are a few scenes, like you see it in the trailer, where he's just kind of gazing in evil fashion down at a computer monitor where you believe it. He sells you on the wickedness at the core of the character. So I think he was pretty goddamn good. Mr. Terrific was a big surprise. I don't think I'd ever seen Eddie Gathegi, if that's how you say his name. He's pretty fucking incredible as Mr. Terrific. And I think a lot of people will be totally oblivious to this character. He was very prominent in the cartoon Justice League Unlimited, and obviously a major part of the comics, but there was a reboot. There was a different Mr. Terrific like in the 40s, 50s, and 60s before we got the Michael Holt version. No, so I'm seeing right here, the Golden Age was Terry Sloan. Michael Holt was introduced, just for a little comic book lore. Hang on one sec. Oh, interesting. I'm seeing here that the Michael Holt version of Mr. Terrific was created by John Ostrander and Tom Mandrake in June of 1997 in Spectre Volume 3, number 54. But I think because so many people are unfamiliar with this character, I think he's going to be a huge surprise and delight for a lot of audience members because they'll have no preconceived notions about the character to kind of judge him against. You can just enjoy the character on his own merits. And he's cool and he's confident and he gets a few laughs and he's got a few kind of badass lines here and there. And his technology is really interesting. I like the character quite a bit. And Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner. I'm very biased because I'm obsessed with Firefly and Serenity. I've always thought that Nathan Fillion doesn't get nearly enough credit for the incredible work he did on that show and in that movie. But I also really like the character of Guy Gardner. I was like 11 or 12 when they relaunched the Justice League as Justice League International in the late 80s. And Guy Gardner was a huge part of that in terms of comic relief. I've always loved just the bowl cut, like just what a blowhard he is, the cockiness, the self-assuredness, the comedy. He's an amazing character, and he's been adapted in a bunch of different ways over the years. I like the most arrogant, annoying version, and clearly James Gunn was reading comics in the late 80s because that is precisely the interpretation of Guy Gardner that he went for. A lot of people want Jon Stewart. A lot of people want Hal Jordan. A lot of people want, Kyle Rayner. There are a bunch of different Green Lanterns out there, and I'm sure the TV show will get into a bunch of them. But Guy Gardner, you know what? Movies need to make people smile and laugh, and Nathan Fillion made me crack up repeatedly throughout this movie, so high five to everybody involved with this interpretation of the character. But let me pause for a second and sing the praises of Skylar, is it Gizondo or Gizondo? But anyway, the actor who plays Jimmy Olsen, because we've seen many interpretations of Jimmy Olsen where he's just the goober who works at the office, who takes pictures and just says yes sir and yes ma'am and kind of runs around worshiping Superman. But every once in a while a writer will come along and they'll show him in a different light. In the comic book, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen ran for a very, very long time. But there's some writers like Grant Morrison in his All-Star Superman run where they portray Jimmy Olsen as like the world's most unlikely babe slayer, where just he has this certain inner calm and confidence that women just find irresistible, and like supermodels who would typically prefer to spend their time with billionaires and movie stars and that sort of thing just find him irresistible because he's just so cute, and everybody's like, what is going on, what is your secret? And he just smiles, almost like how Christopher Reeve smiles when Lois asks him, like, you've got me, well, who's got you? When he saves her in Superman the movie, when she's falling out of the helicopter, and he just smiles in that kind of knowing way. The Jimmy Olsen portrayal here if anything, perhaps some of that could have been more useful in the character of Superman himself, just to make him seem a little bit more like Superman. But there were two moments in this movie where, when he's reacting to the clinginess and desperation of a total smoke show, who is light years above him in weight class in terms of desirability, but they just throw themselves at him. And I was just howling with laughter. And so I love that portrayal. And clearly, James Gunn's been reading All-Star Superman, which, if you've never read, it's Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's 12 issues. It was published from 2006 to 2008. It's definitely one of the best Superman stories ever written. Also, I just realized I should probably pause and acknowledge something. My left eye is looking a little funky. 2 weeks ago, I had a really gnarly sty in my eyelid, and luckily it drained and went away. But what I didn't realize at the time was there was a second one, like an inch higher, that's taking its sweet time. It is just as painful as it looks. So for like the last 2 weeks, I've just had this swollen, pulsating eyeball while it's like 95 degrees in New York, and makes it hard to focus on things. So in any event, if it looks like Superman punched me in the face, it kind of sort of feels like it. In any case, let's get back to discussing the movie. Maybe at this point, I have said enough about the positive side. Let's talk about some of the things that did not quite work. Ultraman was okay. He's big and he's strong, but the big reveal you can see coming from a mile away, and I've seen much better interpretations of Ultraman in the comics. Hawkgirl, awesome in the Justice League animated series and Justice League Unlimited, but kind of a non-entity in this movie. And also, people need to tell actors, when you're playing a superhero, when you walk into a room, stand up straight, shoulders back, good posture, walk like an athlete. If you kind of walk around pigeon-toed with like your knees pointed together and you look like clumsy, well, then you're not a very compelling superhero, no matter how well they might show you flying around and that sort of thing. So I love the character Hawkgirl. I think she's a total badass, but they could have done a slightly better job with the character. I'm also a little bit unsure as to how much of a crowd pleaser this movie is going to be, because my crowd was opening night. It's all the Superman freaks. They were basically prepared to have a great experience, cheering, applauding, everybody waiting to see a hidden scene. There might have been another one at the very end, but I just waited for the mid-credit scene, which is worth sticking around for. It's a good shot. But let's talk now about some of the things that I hated. Without saying what it is, by far the most glaring thing that I despise about this movie, they made a little change to Superman's father, Jor-El, which fundamentally changes the character at its core. And I think there are going to be a lot of people who might, if they're a diehard Superman fan, they might not ever forgive James Gunn. And that might sound a little bit melodramatic, like we're talking about fictional characters. But if these characters have meant something to you on the page for decades or on the screen for decades, you get invested in them emotionally. And if people are invested in a character, well, then that cuts both ways. And if you betray those emotions, people will be justifiably pissed. And I think there can be a lot of people who have a big bullseye painted on James Gunn's forehead due to the way that he portrayed Jor-El in this movie. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, there are way too many scenes in the first half of the movie where we get to see Clark basically just acting like a whiny bitch. And I'm sorry, if you have the ability to pick up a fucking kaiju or catch it when it's falling or catch skyscrapers as they're falling over, I expect you to have a little bit more confidence and self-control and not just having these little temper tantrums. But this is the era in which we live. Martha Wayne, the way she's portrayed, at least early in the movie, they're trying so hard to show her as like a salt-of-the-earth country bumpkin that it borders on self-parody. I found it to be grotesque the way they portrayed her. Like when you watch the scenes in Smallville and Superman the movie, it's pure Norman Rockwell. You believe every single moment of it. They just nail it. This, it's like James Gunn's trying so hard to prove, I don't hate middle America. I don't despise blue-collar people. Look how invested I am in showing them as redneck as humanly possible. But if you turn him into like a cartoon character from Hee Haw, and if you don't know what Hee Haw is, well, then you're not very old. But it was a big, like, it's basically SNL for country people in the 1970s. It was hilarious. But she seems like a Hee Haw character, and I just thought it was totally over the top. And another detail which irritated me in the trailer, and it still irritates me, the suit, the collar looks like ass. And it should have never been added by Jim Lee and Jeff Johns in 2011 when they did the New 52 reboot in the comics. And it just looks baggy. There are times where the suit looks great and it looks form-fitting, but Superman, he's fucking Superman. You should be able to appreciate how badass his physique is. I would argue almost that George Reeves and his baggy costume and the padded shoulders in the 50s might even look better than this new version, this new 52 version. At least they added the red trunks back on. I know some people don't like the red trunks. I love the red trunks. I have no problem with the red trunks. But it does look weird sometimes where it's just kind of folding. It's too stiff and folding up on itself. Superman, he doesn't need armor or a uniform. All he needs is like whatever the cloth is they used on Christopher Reeve in the late 70s. It was just fine. And let me just have a quick look at some of the other characters. Metamorpho is okay. I've always loved Metamorpho. When I was first getting into comics, I was a big fan of Batman and the Outsiders, and Metamorpho was a part of the team. But I look forward to future movies where he might appear. Who else is in here? Doo-ga-doo-ga-doo-ga-doo-ga-doo. Oh, I totally forgot about the Engineer. I first encountered the Engineer in the pages of Warren Ellis's The Authority, where she is absolutely portrayed in a more heroic light. And they give her some heroic qualities in this movie, but she's basically a henchman for Lex Luthor, and that's probably from an earlier version of the script where the Authority was going to be featured front and center. Maybe they're saving her for a future movie version of the Authority, and if they were to adapt the original, like 8 or 9 issues, or however many issues it was that Warren Ellis wrote that were drawn by Brian Hitch, it would crack the world in two. It would be so epic and so badass. People would not be prepared. She looks cool in this, and she's very attractive, but maybe they could have given her more of a redemption arc if she's going to be the Engineer that we know and love from the comics. But big picture, I think the movie is pretty good with a lot of terrible scenes, or kind of bad with a lot of really, really great scenes. You can look at it from either point of view. And I know some people are going to absolutely love and adore it, because there was a person beside me who was swinging back and forth in their seat and talking to their friend the entire movie. He was having the time of his life. So I know some people are will come out of this movie doing cartwheels. I was not one of them, but we don't all need to have the same opinion. There's a weird trend these days where people want to see, I guess they want to see either not necessarily conformity, but people like to feel like they belong to like communities, and those communities all need to have the same opinion. I feel like I much prefer to hang out with individuals who have strong individual opinions. Although there are way too many people expressing their opinions about this movie without having seen it. That annoys the ever-living shit out of me. But once again, once you've seen the movie, well, then you're entitled to say whatever the hell you like. But I think I've gone about as far as I can go without some spoilers, and I'm going to stay very spoiler light for this section, but there are a few little details that I have to discuss, like Jor-El. Goddamn. I mean, I am like legitimately pissed because there was a perfect opportunity for James Gunn. Like, short version is there's a message that Superman has been listening to his entire life. It's like a fragment of a message where his parents are talking to him about how they want him to be a beacon and to be like, a servant of humanity, etc. and so forth. And anytime he needs a lift, he listens to it. But because of the wreck, part of the message was garbled. And so Lex Luthor manages to kind of complete the message. And as it turns out, Jor-El had slightly more aggressive intentions toward Earth, where basically it's like, you'll be so strong that the entire world will serve you. And I thought we were going to see a moment at the very end of the movie where Mr. Terrific would say, oh, by the way, Lex Luthor totally faked with AI or whatever, but he completely hoodwinked the entire world into thinking that you come with ill intentions. And they didn't fix the character. And I feel like whether you love Marlon Brando and Superman the movie, or you love Jor-El and the millions of comics out there featuring the character, or Russell Crowe and Man of Steel, people are going to be pissed, and I'm going to be standing there right alongside the rest of them about that little plot twist. But one thing that I loved, and this is a major spoiler for upcoming movies, but at the very end of the movie, we do get a little bit of a tease of how they're going to portray Supergirl. And it was pretty goddamn funny. And we see now the reason Krypto is such a bad dog is because Supergirl just likes to fucking raise hell. She likes to travel around the galaxy to planets with a red sun so she'll be depowered so she can party and raise hell. And she loves the dog, but she doesn't really discipline the dog. So Krypto's got some issues, which is why he's always ripping up the Fortress of Solitude and that sort of thing. But I like the idea of showing or portraying Supergirl as like a spoiled party girl who travels around the galaxy just raising hell. And so my interest in the movie has gone up. I'm not that interested in the comics by Tom King that it's based on, but I think Millie Alcott will be one hell of a Supergirl. She definitely looks the part. I liked her in season 1 of House of the Dragon quite a bit. So I'm looking forward to her moving forward. and I don't know how long it's going to take for the Justice Gang to become the Justice League, but we see the Hall of Justice in the movie, and I grew up on Challenge of the Super Friends when you'd hear the voiceover narration say, "Meanwhile at the Hall of Justice," and you'd see the Justice League debating how to defeat the Legion of Doom. And so I'm a massive fan of the Hall of Justice. I like the satellite as well, but I liked how at one point in the comics, I think around like 2008 or 9, they had a situation where you had the Hall of Justice on Earth, but you could beam up essentially to the satellite, and so or the Watchtower, some people call it. So I think it was the Justice Society on Earth, but the Justice League up in the satellite. But it wouldn't surprise me if James Gunn is building his way toward that. But at a certain point, they need to figure out what they're going to do about Batman and Wonder Woman. Like, I'm all for Metamorpho and Mr. Terrific and Guy Gardner and all these kind of second-tier and third-tier characters getting a moment to shine. And if James Gunn wants to make a Justice League entirely of characters who have been neglected and ignored over the years, I think that's totally fine, because these characters deserve a moment to shine, and also you don't have preconceived notions. Like, if you're in love with Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, well then it's kind of unfair to whoever's going to play her next to have that kind of comparison. Batman, we're used to it. It's like James Bond at this point. So many people have played the character that we all have our favorite Batman, but it's a weird corporate puzzle they're going to have to figure out about how do they handle the fact that Matt Reeves has a popular ongoing portrayal of the character that's kind of gone quiet, but I know that he just turned in a screenplay. But I think it all boils down to whether or not this movie is successful, and if it's very successful, James Gunn will get to use whatever version of Batman that he likes moving forward. But yeah, I don't know what his long-term plan might be, but you cannot have Superman reach his full potential, at least in terms of comics and animation, without a really cool Batman with him to kind of be a pal with, but also lock horns with and philosophize with, because obviously they have different perspectives and techniques. And because I know James Gunn's a massive fan of Grant Morrison, it wouldn't surprise me if, the same way he took a page from the book of All-Star Superman, he very well might take a page from the book of Grant Morrison's book, Batman and Robin, where Dick Grayson and Damian took on the mantle of Batman and Robin while the world presumed Bruce Wayne to be dead at that point in the comics. Like, you could almost have your cake and eat it too at that point. If Matt Reeves was off doing his thing with Robert Pattinson and Bruce Wayne, James Gunn could be doing his thing with Grayson and Damian. That could work. That would be a compromise. But at a certain point, people are going to want to see the classic Bruce Wayne interacting with David Cornsweet. But now it's time to guess how well this movie will be received. And obviously, there are a lot of angry Superman fans out there where they've got their version they like, and they don't want to hear anything else. And there are still a lot of people that are bitter about how Henry Cavill was treated. And I get it. Henry Cavill was treated very poorly. He at least got to make 3 movies as Superman, which have some great scenes, even if the movies aren't perfect. But I really don't know how well people will receive this, because I'm very much locked into online discourse. But most people just go to see movies, and they don't really worry about all the online discourse and battles and fights and that sort of thing. My initial prediction when I saw the first trailer was $1 billion. My second prediction after seeing the second trailer was $500 million. Now, having seen the movie, I think globally, worldwide, I do think this movie will settle somewhere around like 700, 750. It'll probably end up doing just about the same level of business as Man of Steel. But if it doesn't do as much business as Man of Steel, the Zack Snyder fans are going to eat James Gunn alive. And he's said a lot of things. He's committed a lot of unforced error that will open himself up to attack. Like recently there was an interview, I think it was Times New of London, where the excerpts were then kind of regurgitated by a lot of the trades in America. And filmmakers and actors need to remember that journalists are not their friends. Journalists are trying to sell papers, and they're trying to get clicks on their articles. And by stirring the pot and getting people pissed off, perhaps at the movie's expense, is a great way to get clicks. Because James Gunn was quoted, we can debate to what degree it was out of context or in context, but he said that Superman is a political film. It's kind of political, but not really. I mean, you can project onto the political struggles, like, I guess, real-world counterparts if you wish to. But the way Variety sold that quote, they made it seem like it was an overtly, heavily politicized movie. And James Gunn should be more savvy than that, not to feed ammunition to his haters, because he's already got enough haters as it is. He doesn't need to give them fresh ammunition. But if this movie doesn't do as well as the original Zack Snyder film, they're gonna be all the Snyder fans are gonna be like, look, this is why y'all should have never gotten rid of him in the first place, and they're going to feast on James Gunn's insides. But for my own part, I'll say I liked the movie. I enjoyed the movie. There are times where I hated the movie. I will see it again. I'll definitely want I want to see it with fresh eyes, knowing what the overall strategy is and what the overall structure is, and knowing what the payoffs are. So I'm thinking I won't be quite as annoyed by the ingredients that I dislike, knowing the reward to come. And also, I've seen all of James Gunn's movies multiple times, so I'm more than happy to give him the benefit of the doubt and give this movie a few more tries before offering up my final opinions. So to be continued. I'll probably end up seeing it a second time, either Thursday or Friday, and who knows, maybe I'll take some edibles ahead of time to enhance the experience. But I'm rooting for James Gunn to create a thriving, healthy, kick-ass DC universe. I've loved these characters in these comics for many, many decades. Nothing would make me happier than to see DC finally get a chance to really hog the spotlight as opposed to Marvel. And I feel like this month we're getting a classic Marvel versus DC smackdown. In the 1980s, Marvel fans and DC fans loved to talk shit about which was the cooler company, which had the cooler cast of characters. And I still think that Superman's going to do better than Fantastic Four, but we'll see. And once again, I feel like there's so much internal fighting amongst DC fans. I feel like they need to set aside their differences and start talking some shit to the Marvel fans and get a proper DC versus Marvel online culture war going. I think that would be much more fun as opposed to having the circular firing squad of all the DC fans constantly trying to kill each other. But I think that's about all I had to say about this movie. Hope you enjoyed my review. I look forward to a wide array of different opinions, a wide range of opinions. They're all welcome, whether you love the movie, hate the movie, hate me, love me, whatever. It's all fair game. I recognize that passions run high when discussing Superman, and I totally embrace it. So bring it on. I can take it, and Superman can definitely take it. He's endured since 1938, and I'm sure he'll endure for another 87 years. But if you enjoyed this video, please remember to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.